On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
This group of pro-Palestinian extremists who had been kicked out of Egypt after trying to march to Gaza was not one of the things that Toronto architect and home designer Leonard Temis had expected he would have to face during his recent nerve-wracking journey to flee Israel. But there they were, seated a few seats away from him on the same airplane, leaving Cairo last week, bound for Athens, where Temis was also headed, on the fourth leg of his evacuation from Iranian missiles slamming into Tel Aviv. He couldn't believe it, so he pulled out his phone to record what he saw. All part of his odyssey that started 10 days ago when the Israeli military launched Operation Rising Lion. That's closed Israeli airspace, put the country on an emergency footing, and sent millions of Israelis and tourists into bomb shelters. But after 3 nights of this, Temis's group, the Jewish Federations of North America's LGBTQ Pride Mission, who had brought 100 prominent people to Israel from the community, including 5 Canadians, offered to pay for anybody who wanted to leave and to get them out. So Temis and about 30 others signed up, but they had to keep the route a secret and especially stay off social media. They boarded a specially chartered bus for the trip across Israel into Jordan, then another bus to Amman, a flight from Jordan to Cairo, and from there, either directly back to New York or, in Temis's case, staying on in Cairo for a few days on his own, then making his way home because he'd already planned to visit friends in Europe en route. Even though Israel's been at war since October 7th, Temis originally had felt it would be safe enough to go to Israel this summer. He certainly hadn't bargained for the surprise escalation against Iran, nor the other dangers he could face on his circuitous route out, because LGBTQ people are often persecuted and imprisoned in the 2 Muslim countries, and even though both Jordan and Egypt do have existing peace treaties with Israel, Israel's treatment of Palestinians since October 7th has raised tensions.
And we were walking around and, everything seemed fine. Like, as far as safety goes, I mean, it was a little unnerving just because you have to hide your identity, but overall, I think if it wasn't safe, they wouldn't have let us do it.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Welcome to North Star, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. For well over a week now, we've been reporting stories about Canadians stranded in Israel since Operation Rising Lion began June 13th. But slowly and under the radar for security reasons, the CJN's been speaking to some of the first tourists who found ways to evacuate Israel, mostly without any help from the Canadian government. We couldn't report their stories until it was safe to do so. On today's episode, you'll hear later from Philip Lerner of Thornhill. He was with a group of young adults traveling with the Aish, modern Orthodox movement. They got out of Israel on Tuesday with barely a few hours' warning aboard that Birthright-chartered 11-story Israeli cruise ship to Cyprus. But first, here's my conversation with Leonard Temis. He joined me late at night his time from his hotel in Athens, Greece. Let's get into it because you need to go to bed soon. I don't know what time your flight is out of there.
I'm leaving for the airport at around 10, so I'm fine.
Okay. You need to fill in how you got there and why you were there.
Yes, so I went to Israel with a group. It was called the LGBTQ plus Pride Mission to Israel. And partway through the trip, the war broke out. So I was planning to be there an extra week to visit my cousins and to see a few parts of Israel that weren't covered by the trip itself. And the group provided us an exit plan to get out of Israel. I didn't have too much time to think about it. I spoke to a couple of friends and they're like, get out if you can. So I decided not to stay and wait for the airports to reopen, which I think was a good decision given the intensity of the bombing. And we got out through Jordan. We took a bus ride to Jordan. At the Jordanian border, we switched buses, spent the night in Amman.
Hold on before you go any further. Like, did they encourage the Israeli or the Jewish Federation of North America, the Toronto people, urge you to get out, or they gave you a choice?
I think they if they didn't think it was completely 100% safe, they wouldn't have encouraged us to do it.
Okay.
So,
And where were you located? You were all in Tel Aviv at this time?
yes, we were staying at the Sheraton. It's called the Sheraton Grand Hotel. It's on the Hayar Khan in Tel Aviv.
There was supposed to be a Shabbat dinner, as far as I understand. And then,
Yeah, and we ended up in the bomb shelter in the middle of dinner, in the basement of the hotel. We were in and out a couple of times throughout the course of the evening, 2 or 3 times. That happened for 2 nights that we dealt with going in and out of shelters. I checked out of the Sheraton Sunday morning and checked into another hotel, and it did not have a very nice shelter. The Sheraton's was like a 4-star shelter. It had like a coffee machine and soda machines and like tables and benches to sit at. The one in the Prima was basically like a storage room at the bottom of the hotel. I did that the second night, and then the third night I decided to go walk over to the Sheraton when I got the warning, because there were still a lot of people from the group at the Sheraton. I wasn't that shaken up by it. It seemed the Iron Dome was doing its job for the most part, but then after 3 nights of being in bomb shelters and having to wake up several times during the night, I made the decision that I want to get out of there because I'd rather be somewhere safe.
so how many JFNA people did they get out? And were there people that are still in there from your trip? Do you know?
So they gave everybody the option of leaving, and they told us at the dinner we were having, like in the evening, I think it was like 8 p.m., we have a route, and whoever wants to come, they need to know by 9 a.m. They sent us a form to fill out, a disclaimer asking what our final destination was. And so the next morning, we left, and we had a full bus. So I'm going to say like 25 to 30 people opted to leave. A lot of people had relatives in Israel that they wanted to stay there. Some people wanted to wait a little bit longer till the airlines opened back up.
But was it scary, like going through Israel on a bus to into Jordan?
The most nerve-wracking part was the border. Other than that, I mean, once we were through the border, it's like there was really nothing identifying us as a Jewish group. We were told to not wear our Magen Davids. Women were told to dress more modestly. If anybody had exposed tattoos, they were told to wear long sleeves. Some people had Hebrew tattoos on their bodies. If they couldn't cover them, they put Band-Aids on them. So
Oh.
yeah, it actually, I mean, once we were in Jordan, like they were very welcoming to us. I don't know if they knew we were Jews or Israelis.
Or
And
gay?
I mean, yeah, well, definitely we had to keep that that quiet.
And there was no bombs. There was no. You didn't hear any airplanes going back, or did you see any of that?
So the first night we were in Jordan, we were sitting outside, like in a restaurant that had an outdoor courtyard, and they saw the missiles overhead going into Israel. So they brought us inside the restaurant, and that was it. The next day, they took us to Jerash, a Jordanian ruin. So we were like tourists, and we were walking around, and everything seemed fine. It was interesting. And then they took us to the airport. We flew from Jordan to Cairo. In Cairo, we were met by another group organizing person. They had to exit the airport and re-enter to go from one terminal to the next, which meant we all had to have visas. So this guy issued visas for us, and at that point, I had made my own arrangements to fly to Athens because that had been on my itinerary previously.
So you were in Cairo. Have you ever been to any of these other Middle Eastern countries before, or just have you ever been to Israel before?
I went to Israel twice actually as a
So
child,
you haven't been back in like what, 40 years?
1977. So yeah,
Early 50 years, 40
if
years.
50 years,
Oh,
more
that's
like
crazy.
closer to 50,
But
48.
you've never been
Yeah,
to
or 40.
Jordan or you've never been to Egypt or any of those countries. No. Okay, so you get to Cairo and I saw some videos that you shot that you encountered the group of protesters that had tried to march into Gaza. Tell me about that.
Okay, so I stayed overnight in Cairo, got in a pyramid tour, and then got back to the airport, got on the plane, and the takeoff got delayed. But then suddenly somebody comes on the plane. A lot of people on the plane were clapping, and I hear somebody say, shout out Free Palestine. And I didn't really quite know what was going on. I was sort of taken aback. The plane took off, and then we land in Athens, and all of a sudden everybody starts shouting. They start shouting like "Free Palestine, Palestine." They were pronouncing it, chanting it over and over again, and clapping. So I brought out my phone. And I started videoing because I couldn't believe it, and then I realized they must have been the people that were on the walk to Gaza. And there was a guy literally across the aisle from me, like one or two rows up, who stood up and said, "Thank you. I am from Gaza. Thank you." Which is like, your life can't be that bad if you're flying to Greece on, anyways.
Well, we
That's
don't know his story, but okay, so you're escaping bombs from Iran that are raining down on your neighborhood, on your hotel, on you. And then you get on a plane for people who hate the Israelis and hate Jews and also free Palestine. How does that two things happen? And what do you how does that go through your mind at the time?
I was a little freaked out, and I wanted to say something after being on that amazing informational trip and having an incredible understanding of what's going on in the Middle East. They were almost like a mob, and I just thought, okay, I'm just gonna be low key about this and like, get off this plane. And when we were off the plane and walking through customs, they started shouting it again. Like I guess some of them had been detained in Egypt, I guess, and even imprisoned. And so I imagine that once they were in Greece, they felt like they could scream it again. And so they were literally walking through customs screaming. And, I just got through customs and walked out. And again, there was a mob of people waiting with Palestinian flags and banners saying the walk to Gaza. So the whole thing until I got in my taxi was a bit of a mob scene. But that's it. I got to my hotel, went to bed. The next morning I woke up and heard people speaking Hebrew in the lobby of my hotel. I was like, oh my God, thank God. I'm like back with my people. I wanted to go up to them and say, I'm Israel. Hi. But I wasn't, I didn't speak to them there, but I did go to the laundromat because I hadn't had a chance to do laundry because I planned to, but then the bombing started. So I went to a laundromat and there were several Israelis in the laundromat doing laundry.
So what's now?
Well, I mean, when I saw the Israelis in the lobby of my hotel, I wanted to cry because I was just like so frazzled by the plane incident, really. And having been in Cairo by myself for a night and half a day without the group, it was stressful. Although I have to say, everybody, at the hotel was very nice. And of course, I didn't tell anybody I was Jewish or gay at the hotel in Cairo either. So if there is PTSD, I haven't really experienced it too much. I mean, it was when you're in the shelter, you don't hear the bombs. So I didn't hear the explosions. There's some people, a couple of people on the group actually heard explosions. So for me, I wasn't hearing any explosions. So it was a little bit less nerve wracking other than the air raid sirens, which were nerve wracking in and of themselves to hear
So you're going to take a few days to get back to Canada.
because I already had a flight tomorrow pre-booked from Greece to Copenhagen, which is a half an hour car ride to Malmo where my friend lived.
Right, where they don't like Jews either. Okay, never mind. You have to be careful. I wish you happy trails and only calm seas, as they say. And thank you for giving me this long interview.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
If you haven't yet seen the videos coming out of last week's sea evacuation of 1,500 young North American tourists by the Birthright organization, imagine the scene. Throngs of smiling young people wearing only bathing suits, dancing and partying on the pool deck of an Israeli cruise ship en route from Ashdod to Cyprus with an Israeli Navy escort. It might not have occurred to some of the stranded tourists that their exodus was being made nearly 80 years after illegal boatloads of Jewish refugees from the Holocaust bound for Palestine were caught and imprisoned in Cyprus detention camps by the British Mandate, or that this week that Mediterranean island has been providing kind of a reverse escape route for thousands of Jews. When Birthright had extra space on their vessel, other North American trips were offered places, and while 24-year-old Philip Lerner and his friends felt a bit guilty about leaving, they hadn't counted on being in Israel at such a scary time. And even once they were on board, it wasn't all smooth sailing despite the carnival scenes. I caught up with Lerner in the Larnaca airport in Cyprus. What did you stay in? Was it did you have your own bed, your own stateroom, or how did that work?
It was 3 or 4 people to a stateroom. Pretty small stateroom, if I'm being honest, but we all had our own bed, so that was nice.
How long was the journey from when you set sail?
The journey was about a solid 18 hours. We left at 1 p.m. and then we got in at 7 a.m. the next morning.
And was it rough?
Honestly, no. The winds were not too intense and the ship was big enough to counteract them. It was actually, for the most part, a really fun experience. There are times where I had to remind myself, wait, Philip, this is not just a pleasure cruise. You're being evacuated right now.
What did the kids with you and your friends call the ship?
We called it the Jew cruise. There were a couple jokes going around comparing it to Noah's Ark, but we stuck with Jew cruise.
And was there enough food for everybody?
Oh, beyond. There were a lot of restaurants, buffets. There was no issues with food. This was a proper cruise ship.
And did your whole group come out with you from Olami?
We actually were given the choice. This is literally the night before. We were given so little notice about this, 7 p.m. the night before. We were basically told by our group leaders, all right, there is a ship and we're going to leave at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning to get there. You can come if you want, or if you so choose, you can stay in Israel with family, go to yeshiva, seminary, whatever you want. But we had to make some pretty quick decisions. And at that time, we were not 100% sure what type of ship it was. A part of me was really nervous because I was wait, am I going to be sitting on the floor of a cargo ship for 15, 18 hours? But my top priority was getting out of the country. So it was getting really insane.
You checked with your parents and what they wanted you to do?
That was my first call. They were happy with my decision.
How long did it take to get to where the ship was?
I was located in West Jerusalem. So in terms of safety in that area, it was one of the safer areas, saying that knowing that we were in and out of bomb shelters about 10 times during a span of 4 days. It took us about an hour to get to the port of the ship, which was in Ashdod.
And were you able to board right away, or were there a delay where you had some more incoming stuff to deal with?
A couple hours before we boarded, we got sirens, or at least we got the pre-warning for sirens, but sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. Some group leaders were telling that people get out of a bus, get down on the ground, hands above your heads. Now, this might have ended up being a little bit of an over-exaggeration, because apparently it was just a warning, but I still did it. I'll take that over an alternative. It was scary.
I saw some videos that people sent other people, And there was like a reception committee, just like you're getting on a cruise with staff dancing right?
Yeah, this was a legitimate cruise. I mean, Birthright, they really pulled through. When we got to Cyprus, they put us up in what looked like a 4-star hotel. And I was like, you know what? With everything we went through, we deserve this. Obviously, I was extremely grateful.
So now you're going where? Do you know how you're getting home?
The plan was go from Cyprus to Poland, then to JFK in New York, and then to Toronto. But what happened was when we got on plane, we were on that plane for 3 hours and it was not moving because I'm not sure if this is 100% accurate, but what I heard was that the rockets that were happening were actually messing with the navigation systems. So we didn't feel comfortable flying. And this is after pulling close to an all-nighter. We got to the airport at 1 a.m. We boarded around 5 a.m. And at 8 a.m. we were told to get off. And at that point, Birthright and Olemi just said, let's get these guys home any way that it takes. If you want to make your own way home, we'll give you, I think it was like a $3,000 USD up to that in reimbursements. So now my new flight path, maybe a touch scarier than the first one. I'm going to be flying to Egypt first, and that flight leaves in about 4 hours. But then from there, after about a 6-hour layover, it's going to be straight Egypt to Toronto.
And you're flying by yourself, or you have come friends with you?
I've got some friends to be on the flight.
Okay, good.
I was not doing this on my own. Honestly, I'm just happy to be getting out.
You said that it was like messing up with the guidance, whatever, but you don't see any of the bombs or hear anything at all when you're there, right? Okay, I'm just curious. So it's...
No, but actually something interesting. While we were on the cruise, about 3 hours after departing, we did see a rocket get intercepted over us. I don't know where it got intercepted, but over our heads, we could see like the jet stream. It was all wavy. We knew it was intercepted. But that was happening while we were on the top deck, the pool deck.
Whoa.
We saw it. I didn't hear any doing.
I was told that the Israeli Navy was escorting you. Is that correct?
I'm unsure if it was the Israeli Navy or international or U.S. I think after a certain point, once we got to international waters, it had to be U.S. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, but let's just unpack that. So your Navy is escorting you. A Navy is escorting you across the Mediterranean. How does that sit with you? How did you feel about all of this effort to keep you safe?
First off, it was like, wow, who am I to deserve all this type of protection? Like, I just came here for a 1-week volunteer trip. I'm not exactly royalty. But the other part was just the fact that they felt it was necessary made me feel a little bit more on edge as well. It's like, okay, this is actually a risky journey I'm making. It's easy to forget that when you're surrounded by bars and pool parties.
How did you keep yourself calm?
I just really went for everything the cruise had to offer. I've actually been on some cruises before. And then there were times where I just gave myself some downtime as like, all right, relax.
Have you ever experienced anything like this in your entire life?
Never. This was an absolute first. In and out of bomb shelters, literally while we were doing Kabbalah Shabbat, we had to go to a bomb shelter a few times. And we just kept on seeing Kabbalah Shabbat in the bomb shelter. It was kind of incredible and something I never want to experience again.
You guys get any of your money back, or you have to pay back all this rescue money? Like, what's the financial stuff that we have to understand?
Our trip was already so crazy subsidized. We were only paying $600 USD for everything. And that's more than most Birthright trips. Most Birthright trips are free. The only thing that we have to pay back is if people book their own flights home, we get reimbursed up to $3,000. But yeah, they basically had a free cruise. When does that happen?
I hope that your rest of your journey is boring, very boring.
I would be okay with that.
Thank you so much for zooming in from Cyprus Airport.
Absolutely.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of North Star, made possible in part thanks to Ira Gluskin and Maxine Gronowski-Gluskin's Charitable Foundation. You'll be happy to know that Philip Lerner got home safely early Friday, and his parents took him out for a celebratory breakfast at What a Bagel. Leonard Temis expects to be back in Toronto this Shabbat. Our show's produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman and Andrea Varsany. The executive producer is Michael Freeman, and the music is by Brett Higgins. Thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.